It was supposed to be a simple weekend retreat. 4 friends, a cozy cabin in the mountains, and a chance to escape the chaos of city life. Snow was part of the charm. They had all agreed it would make the setting feel like a winter wonderland. But by the second night, the wonderland had transformed into a nightmare. The storm arrived without warning, a wall of white swallowing the horizon. The wind howled like a wounded beast, shaking the cabin and rattling its windows. Outside, the snow piled higher and higher, burying the car and cutting off any hope of escape. They had enough food and firewood to last a few days, so they weren't worried at first. But that was before the tapping began. It started faintly, just as the rain mixed with sleet against the windows. At first, they thought it was branches hitting the glass. But when the tapping moved from one window to the next, too deliberate to be random, the unease began to creep in. Probably just the wind, Alex said, though his voice betrayed his doubt. Nothing to worry about. Wind doesn't sound like fingers, Carly muttered, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her words lingered in the silence that followed. By midnight, the power went out. The cabin descended into a suffocating darkness, broken only by the flickering flames of the fireplace. They lit candles and tried to laugh off their nerves, but the mood had shifted. The wind screamed outside, and the relentless tapping resumed, louder now. "Someone's out there," Nate whispered, staring at the frosted window. "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah shot back. "Who would be out in a storm like this?" "Exactly," Nate said, his voice trembling. "Who?" Carly stood and crossed to the window, pressing her face to the glass. "I can't see anything," she said, squinting into the storm, and then she froze. Her breath fogged the glass as she whispered, "Oh my God, there's something out there." The others rushed to her side. At first, all they could see was the swirling snow, a chaotic blur of white, but then, faintly, a shape emerged. A figure stood just beyond the tree line, motionless. Its outline was tall and thin, but its face, or what should have been its face, was obscured by the storm. It didn't move, even as the wind tore through the trees. "Is it a person?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible. "Why isn't it moving?" Carly whimpered. Nate grabbed a flashlight and headed for the door. "Wait!" Sarah cried, grabbing his arm. "You can't go out there! What if they need help?" Nate argued. "They'll freeze to death." But when he opened the door, the wind slammed into him like a freight train, and the figure was gone. The tapping grew more insistent as the night wore on, sometimes at one window, sometimes another. They moved the couch in front of the door and kept the fire roaring, the shadows dancing wildly on the cabin walls. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind set their nerves on edge. At 3 a.m., Carly screamed. The others found her in the kitchen, staring at the window above the sink. There, in the frost, were handprints, 5 long, spindly fingers. The prints weren't melting as they should have from the heat inside. Instead, they seemed to sink deeper into the glass, as though whatever had made them was pressing harder from the other side. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. They spent the rest of the night huddled together in the living room, weapons improvised from fireplace tools and kitchen knives. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the temperature inside the cabin was dropping. They fed the fire, but it barely seemed to help. As dawn approached, the tapping finally stopped. A brief, uneasy silence fell over the cabin before they heard something new. A dragging sound, slow and deliberate, moving across the roof. "How is it on the roof?" Alex whispered, his voice trembling. The sound moved from one end of the cabin to the other, pausing directly above them. Then, with a deafening crash, the chimney was wrenched open. Snow and ash spilled into the fireplace, and something long and pale reached down, clawing at the edges. They screamed and ran for the door, but the storm was still raging outside. The snow was waist-deep, and the figure from the woods was there, waiting, its eyeless face somehow watching them. Trapped between the storm and the creature, They realized too late that they had been lured there, prey in a trap. One by one, the darkness claimed them, their screams swallowed by the blizzard. When the storm finally cleared, the cabin stood empty, its windows frosted over, the fireplace cold and dead. Locals would later swear they heard screams carried on the wind that night, but no trace of the friends was ever found. Only the handprints remained, etched into the glass like a warning.